Well, we're here doing a little car camping for the weekend, and I brought my hammock set up, and I was really curious. This is the first time for me to use the edge tarp from War Bonnet. I was really curious how it was going to cover with the Blackbird. Turned out pretty good. You can see though that if I pull this back, you can see that this little cinch area is just barely underneath, by maybe like 4 inches, is barely underneath the tarp. We've had a fair amount of rain today, and everything appears to be dry. Here on this side you can see the same thing. Here's the corner of the tarp. Here is the little buckles, and you can see that when it's perfectly in line with the tarp, which it's not right now, it actually gives you about maybe 5 inches of coverage past the buckles. When it's not in line with the tarp, you can see that if I pull this just a little bit, you can see my buckles, which is not a big deal. We had a fair amount of rain today, and my webbing is wet up to the point where it feels like it dripped off of the loop there, and never actually. This is not wet. This little loop of Amsteel is not wet. Here's something interesting. Those of you who have got tarps that have flat failed seam, this is something you won't have to deal with. Can you see that? The tarp has it's not a flat failed seam, it stands up, and if you have a ridge line running underneath the tarp, it will want to, unless it's perfectly in line, it will want to have a little spot where water can gather here. I don't know if you can see that. There's probably about an inch where the ridge line for the tarp, which is run underneath. Let's see if I can make it run off here. Actually, before I make it run off, I want to see if it's dripped any inside. That would be a good test as well. But you can see that it's just, my ridge line is not perfectly centered on the tarp because I've pulled it out a little bit harder on this edge than I have on the front. Let's see if we got any water underneath here. Oh, let's see. You can actually see water. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. There's water pulled up right there. And believe it or not, this is completely dry. This whole ridge line is completely dry. So that's a testament, I guess, to the seam sealing. But maybe for this particular tarp, because the seam does not lay flat, it may be a good reason to run your ridge line above the tarp, which I could do just fine. Let's see, on this end I've got a whoopee hook. I'm sorry, not a whoopee hook, a Dutch hook for the zinget. These are homemade tarp skins, which are pretty wet right now. It's the first time I've ever tried to sew anything ever, and you know, they turned out okay. They're not perfect by any means, but they work, they function. And I stuck this is a zip tie in there, sewed it in so it would help kind of make it stand open, which is not completely necessary, but I like it. I've got it's just a soft shackle prusik straight on the zinget. Let's go to this other end. What I normally do is there's another soft shackle prusik there And what I normally do is use another prusik, which you see here, and normally I would tie like a trucker's hitch, but I got one of these the other day, these little plastic figure 9s. It weighs, I want to say it's like maybe a gram. I mean, it's really light. I don't remember right off the top of my head what it weighs. So I kind of like it. I don't know if I'll stick with it or if I'll go back to just tying the knot myself. First test with this tarp in the rain, and it passed with flying colors. I will say this though, I wouldn't ever want to go smaller than this, and there's just not a whole lot of room for error on each end, which makes it nice having the prusiks on there, because I can slide it where I need it. But you definitely don't want to. All that stuff is dry. I just was curious if that underquilt was dry, and it is. So it sounds like the family's coming back. They went for a walk while I took care of some other business that will be unnamed, and figured I'd get out the camera while they're gone and everything was quiet, and film this little setup. It's not bad. But I would recommend, just for the sake of keeping this water from pooling up there, running your ridgeline over the top as opposed to underneath your tarp. And the reason I usually run it underneath is I find it really convenient to hang my boots from my ridgeline at night. That way they're not in there with me in the hammock, but they are close by and not on the ground, and where critters could potentially try to nest for the evening. Those are the tents we actually slept in last night, since we had the fam with us. But my wife and daughter, who's 1 year old, got in the hammock for the first time this morning to take a nap and loved it, and so that made me really proud. And they're already grinning because they know what I'm doing over here. And my wife just said, "Did you drop a deuce?" So classy. Well, it's okay.
Say hi, Daddy.
You gonna say hi? Hi.
Hi, Daddy.
Say hi. You look sleepy again. Oh.